It's a 2-star journal in ABS list. I'm going with the UK system here, and with the high impact factor over 6. So if you are interested in tourism and hospitality related and is a contemporary issues, please send your paper to Tourism Management Perspective, and also Associate Editor for Services Industries Journal, International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management, and editorial board of several other journals, such as the Journal of Travel Research, Journal of Business Research, International Journal of Consumer Studies. And this slide is more like my own, as I said, personal view on mixed method. My colleagues might have different view, but this is my personal view here. Let's see. Right. So what is important whenever it comes to the methodological view is thinking about the details. And always, when I talk about anything about admin, I always say details, details, details. Because detail is very important whenever you want to do any research. It doesn't matter if you want to do qualitative, quantitative, mixed method, or multi-method. You need to focus on the approaches and how you getting there. And for doing that, is a research question should be the first thing to start. So whenever I want to do a research, write a paper, or help with PhD students, I ask them, what is your research question? So based on the research question, you could have, you could think about your work is going to be, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method, or anything else. So very important to first, go with the, basically the research question. So if you want to just basically say what is quantitative research, is you need to think about what is new in your area. What does it add to present, state of knowledge? You look at the dependent and independent variables, you look at the hypothesis, you look at the research questions, and remember the critical literature review is vital here. So you need to think about, so what question? Also, you need to talk about your data. Say, did you collect your data yourself? If so, how you collect this data, what measure you use, what is the reliability and validity when we're talking about the quantitative data, and also sample size, et cetera, et cetera. How did you analyze the data? So which kind of software you use, why that particular software, why that particular statistical approaches you use, and also you need to link the existing knowledge and build something on that. And in old days, it used to be just about hypothesis development, but these days is mainly, the journals and editors, and one of them, I look at overarching theory to support the hypothesis, and also come to methodological limitations. So, for example, we did a paper a couple of years ago in Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management. We said that mood regularities is influencing consumer participation, and there are different values comes out of that. And we use value creation as a theory for supporting our paper. Another paper we did with my good friend Mustafa Rasuli managed from Taylor University. And again, we running a structure equation modeling and collecting data from 2 different cities in Iran and trying to comparing them. So there was a hypothesis development going on, and it was based on the theories as well. So that is very important. So theory comes first before we go to any data analysis. When we come to the other side of the coin, when looking at the qualitative research, we need to answer several questions. Does the research seek to understand the social process? So more in depth of what are the meaning of the subjective experiences? So very subjective view of you. How did the data collected? Who collected data? which kind of experiences, you know, the researcher had, and how they explain to the participant. Goes to the analysis section. Again, there is you're looking at the themes, sub-themes, you're looking at categories, you're looking at, you know, which kind of, if you want to use a sort of computer analysis approaches, how you're going to do that, which software you should use, and why sometimes you shouldn't use the softwares. Also, there is you know, the reliability and validity steps there, triangulation, and you know, there are several other things happening with the qualitative research. And the quotation, field notes, and other supporting appropriate data is important. And like any other researchers, we have limitations here as well. Again, another example of that, with one of my PhD students, we did a paper for Annals of Tourism Research. We look at the cultural capital idea from Pierre Bourdieu. And I like when I write something qualitative, always have some paper to say what is the main view we use here. Here was about volunteer tourism. So we say, well, there are the main paper, we put in a table 1, and also developing sort of conceptual framework out of your, you know, our data there, which you could see on the screen in figure 1. So that was what we did. Again, another example from the Annals of Tourism Research, we collected data from National Trust a couple of years ago. We look at these CSR development approaches, which was developed in the mainstream business and management literature, never applied to heritage sites. So it was the first paper. And if you see the table 2, we look at how these steps, which are in the figure 1, are applicable for the heritage site. And we find that some of them are applicable for the heritage sites, some of them are not applicable. So again, we look at this MONS as a model and use some data we, as I said, collected from the National Trust and from the employees to support our, you know, support or reject if this models is working in heritage sites. So far, I just want to give a very quick glance of what is quantitative, what is qualitative. When it comes to the mixed method or multi-method approaches, we're looking at different views and pictures of the same phenomenon. So again, here, what is important, what is the research question? So which kind of research question we want to use? Because we research question, we're going to help us with better understanding the research problems. So we find the research question, and this research question can come from anywhere. Like some of us, well, I am interested to look at what are the mainstream, like journals are following, and take that and apply that to tourism and hospitality. That's my approach normally. But some of my colleagues, they might have different approaches. They might find some gap in one of the literatures in tourism and hospitality and try to fill up that. So it depends on the people and how they approach this. It is very important when we talk about the mixed method. You see, these are the postgraduate thesis in using the mixed method in before 2014. And you see how these gradually from 80s with 3 only theses in US is using the mixed method approach to 2014 now is over 2,500, and recent data shows now is over 5,000. Even between 2014 and now is in rapid, you know, increase on use of the mixed method approaches, particularly in postgraduate thesis. Now, before I go further, I would like to see if somebody can tell me what is differences between mixed method and multi-method? Anyone? Yeah? You could type it in your chat box.
Oh yeah, somebody in the chat has said that mixed method has steps. Phase 1, 2, 3.
No.
All right, anybody like to unmute and try to answer?
Yeah.
Okay, we have one in chat. Mixed method must have both quali and quanti.
Oh, yes. So yes. So that's correct. So when we say mixed method,
Can I answer?
Prof. Babak, you are muted.
Sorry, Prof, you're mute.
Yes, who is muting everyone? Could you please not do that? Yeah.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, you can hear you. Yes.
Yes. Somebody was muting me. I promise I'm not going to talk too much, so don't unmute me. So yeah, so mixed method basically when you mix a quantitative and qualitative, but multi-method when you have multiple qualitative or multiple quantitative. So that is the differences between these two different approaches. So you can see from the screen, and mixed method is normally called MMR, and multi-method is more like multiple types of qualitative and quantitative methods. The misuse, and even there are papers published, still people are mixing using multi or mixed method. So be careful, and some, I've seen the paper are rejected based on confusing these two terms. Little bit of philosophical background on this is when we're talking about and why we're using mixed method, is when we want to separate it, positivism from the post-positivism approaches. Because the positivism approaches, I'm sure you are all aware of that, is natural science of social sciences. And is about if A, then B likely can happen. So something isn't going to influence on something, and we're all looking at hypothesis development and separation of the subjectivism from the objectivism. And the, sorry, my screen is getting fine. Yeah, and positivist theory, looking at the causal relationship, is a very deductive approaches and is testing the hypothesis and reducing phenomena to simplest form. So we're looking at simplifying that. That's why you use a quantitative approaches there. But there are issues with the using of positivism is static, and I like this question: how can social action guided by human subjectivity be objective? Everything we're talking here is about subjectivity, how we could objectify everything subjective. But is I use it and it's, as I said, we use it to the shortcoming. Any method we use is comes with the shortcoming, and is very good for the problem solving. Post-positivist theory has a general meaning, and it came after people start talking about the criticism of the positivism, and people say the values and experience of researchers by using, measurement, and measurements are flavorable as well. So, and post-positives are drawn from the quantitative and qualitative methods and develop empirical evidence in real world settings. So there are differences between these. In a nutshell, reality is real. I like this quote, and truth is universal, but we cannot directly access either of them. So we cannot say everything can be qualitative, everything can be quantitative. So that is why it's good to use both of them to understand the phenomenon. This is a snapshot, and for those of you who are interested in
my apologies, Dr. Babak. There appears to be a window in front of your screen that is blocking your presentation slides. I think you might need to check and see what is blocking your view.
So it comes up and goes. I don't know what is the issue.
Okay,
with that.
it's away now. Yes.
It comes back
but yeah,
again.
what window is that exactly? You might want to remove it, or oh, is it the one that's saying that there are people asking to be admitted into the room?
Yes, that is one. Yes.
Oh, okay. I think one way to stop it would be to
And
not
also another one, please move the windows.
yeah, that appears because of that window is there. That's why that is there per se.
Yeah, but I think is other ones is about because I need to admit people to come in.
Yeah, so can you move that notification off screen, maybe into the bottom left-hand corner so that it doesn't obstruct the view?
I can't move anything. It's there. I need to close the windows.
Okay. Maybe what we can do is that we can remove Dr. Babak as the co-host so that he doesn't get those notifications. Because I think we've already allowed that anybody can share their screen, so I think it should be all right. Yeah. So sorry for this issue. All right, you are no longer a co-host, but okay, the thing is gone. Okay, you can continue your presentation.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
I think it is still there.
It's still there?
Yes, still there.
It says, please move these windows away from the share application.
Maybe for Babak, you can stop sharing and reshare again and see, can settle this problem.
Okay. Right. I'm going to share again.
Hopefully it works this time.
Is it working now? Let's see.
So far, so good.
Right. I think it's gone now.
Yeah, looks good. Okay.
Good. Sorry about that. We all using Teams, Zooms on all these things, but each day something pops up and is annoying. But I think after 2 years, they all got used to the situation of COVID and the influence on how we trying to understand how we could share the screen and how we could chat online and etc. Anyway, so if you look at the differences, between the positivism and post-positivism, and this is something interesting. I find that table from very old days when I did my PhD, and separation between the positivism and post-positivism. And I developed that table based on a couple of papers and the books I read those days. And it's interesting to see ontologically and epistemologically, methodologically, how you could define and separate these two. So positivism is a naive realism, but when we're talking about post-positivism, we're talking about critical realism here. Objectivism is when we're talking about positivism, and modified dualist or objectivism, we're talking about post-positivism. It's still objectivism approach, but we say there are the reality can be modified. And also we say that the experiment should be there, all the connection, all these hypothesis development should be there. But also when we're talking about post-positivism, we say we can divide we could have some qualitative, for example, insight to see all these data we find from our surveys can be generalized, or when we ask people during the interview, they might have a different opinion. So that is very important when we're talking about the mixed method approach, and we can say all the reality that we get from the surveys and questionnaire can be modified with use of another qualitative researchers. Philosophical foundation. I'm not going to go in the detail of that. There are several philosophical foundations: pragmatism, transformatism, dialectical. All these very interesting philosophical foundations are important, and depends on which one you want to use. But Babak's view is a pragmatism. I use pragmatism when I do mixed method or multi-method approaches, because I think believing that qualitative and quantitative research approaches should be viewed as complementary and suitable for use within the research toolkit. Depends on, remember I said we need to use research question before we start doing our choosing which data, which quality are we going to use, qualitative or quantitative. So it all goes back to that. It's very important to realize that when we do, which philosophical stance we have. And as I said, this is my own view, but my colleagues, they use different. Some people, they like to say this is a critical realism. Some people, they like to say this is another approaches, and there is no right or wrong on that. Depends on your research question and your view of the reality and the world. There are different types of mixed method. Again, I'm not going to go through the details, but basically is either is going to be parallel or sequential. Either is you collect the data qualitatively and quantitatively. You collect the interviews and survey in the same time, or one of them is quantitative is supporting your qualitative, or the qualitative is supporting your quantitative, which is the sequential. So it's all about that. One of the, for example, examples of how you could use this is a sequential exploratory approach, which I use quite often in my studies. So you have introduction and your research question is there. Then you have a literature review you based on, and you have a hypothesis development section within the literature review or after that. And there is a methodology, and this is the section. Normally you need to decide which kind of mixed method approaches you want to use, which type of the mixed method you want to use. So here is a sequential exploratory. And then you say, I have a qualitative phase and then quantitative phase. And you just say the method. So qualitative is how you collect your data, how, and the quantitative, how you collect your quantitative data, and then you have a result and discussion section, and separately you say this is the qualitative analysis, this is the quantitative analysis, and there are conclusions and implication and limitation at last. So this is so short, how the sequential approach normally works. Key characteristics of the mixed method approaches is you need to think about the rationale of why you're doing that, how you're going to collect the qualitative or quantitative, prioritizing. So sequential, parallel, quant is going to help quant is going to help qual, how this is going to work, and match data analysis to the design, which kind of data analysis you're going to use, and which kind of diagram you, so you need to have some diagram. See that loop, for example, the previous slide. So something like this, so you know what you're going to do with your use of mixed methods. Analyzing that is good, and there are nice books like Creswell book for they can help you how to write a report and discussion, but it all comes back to your research question. I don't know how many times I repeated this today, but that is the most important part of applying mixed method approaches. There are several difficulties, like any methods. So building conceptual model for multiple sources of data is high cost, because you're going to collect, interviews and time consuming, or you want to do survey, all these, it's going to take time and is expensive. normally. You need to work with the multiple teams of people. So some people are good in qualitative, some people are good in quantitative. Finding match knows both qualitative and quantitative and the mixed method and multi-method normally is difficult. There's a personal bias because it comes to subjectivity when you are working with the multiple team of the people, different answer, the same phenomena, it might be again confusing. And also the reliability and validity is very important. And for like any study, doesn't matter you do qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method, reliability and validity is the part normally your paper publishes in a high-ranked journals or low-ranked journals, because editors and journals are very conscious of this. Important here is why our research problems are not addressed using mixed method approaches. So these are the questions you need to answer, particularly for those of you postgraduate students and you want to sort of use these mixed method approaches in your dissertation, your thesis. You need to bear of these questions before going. Do you really need to use this approach? Why you want to use it? Is it useful, or just because it's a fancy term and you want to say, I'm going to use a mixed method approaches? Do you have a good philosophical understanding? Is it going to pragmatism? Is it going to be any approaches you're using? Can you get enough participants? Think about practicality here as well. You might not able to get all the data you want. You know, think about practicality before going with this kind of approach. And do you have a time and skills? Do you know both qual and quant? And how you're going to do that? So this is very, very important. Couple of examples of mixed method papers we used. So one of them published with, so those of you had a section today with Dr. Olia in the fuzzy data analysis, I don't know today or tomorrow, but if you have a session with about the FSQCA, we did a paper, Annals of Tourism Research, and in that one, we collected data from a festival. We used both interviews and a survey, and we had a conceptual framework which you use the fuzzy data analysis, but also as you see in the top of the page, we had some interviews to complement our, if you like, quantitative survey data. Another example published in Journal of Business Research, and in this paper, again, we had some conceptual framework. We said the perceived news configuration, all these components influencing the brand love, and that is influencing the loyalty. And we look at the online fan pages. And again, here we use the FSQCA result, but also complemented with some qualitative codes. Another paper published in Tourism Management. For that, I use both, I mean, group of the researchers, my colleagues and I, we used both survey and qualitative. And for the qualitative, and it was about medical tourism. So how medical tourism, people traveling to some destination for a medical tourism purpose. So it was a data. Now here, data sets are different. The quantitative one was about the tourists, and qualitative one was about the hospital employees. So for the hospital employees, we use a methodology, which is applied that first time in tourism and hospitality. For those of you who are interested to very structured qualitative approaches, I really recommend this approach. And basically in this approach, you have a first order codes, which you see in the screen. So basically very sub themes. And then we have a big themes like a culture of practice, we call it second order, and aggregated. So all of these is about you know, the value creation in medical tourism of the hospital. So again, we use this approach, mixing both qualitative and quantitative. Another paper in Journal of Business Research, that is a multiple one. So we we use the data, and we used two different approaches for the same data. And in that one, we use HLM, hierarchical level modeling, and also the FSQC. So we want to see how these different methods is complementing each other with the same data set. Another paper published in Journal of Travel Research, again, that was a multiple one. So the same data set, but we use one for the structural cohesion modeling and look at the two different airports and misbehavior of the people. Also, we had the FSQC. These are just examples, and because we don't have a time, I'm not going to go into in detail, but you see there are application for all of these methods and how you could use. Very good application, and that is my favorite one, is the scale development. Very good approach of using mixed methods. And for all those of you who are interested, so this paper published in Tourism Management last year, and we use developing scale so you could measure the abstract things later on. We use that for the social media sharing construct. So again, domain of definitions or literature, which in that stage one of the scale development. So you use sort of, expert panels, some literature review, use some interviews. So you have that qualitative grounding, and then item generation. So you do the first data set of quantitative with a small sample, and then item reduction. So you use sort of factor analysis to reducing that, and initial validation, which is you collecting, in this case, the initial data set from Turkey, and the final validation, we collected another data set for validating that from Scotland. So again, this is a very good application of scale development. Because of, and this again, I'm going back to my PhD time. My PhD was about scale development. My interest on scale development and mixed method goes back to very, very long time ago. Thanks very much to all of you, and thanks very much for the time. Any questions? I'm gonna unshare my screen.
All right, thank you very much for that, Professor Babak. Yes, that was actually a very interesting presentation. A lot of very good different sort of like approaches that you presented. So I think a lot of our students will have very, very useful ideas, or at least things that they might want to consider for their own research as well. We have a couple of questions from the Slido and a few questions that people have also sort of like DM'd me as well, but I will go through with the Slido ones first. But if you have any other questions, feel free to use the Slido, or you can DM me as well. So from the Slido, first question is, for the sequential explanatory design, if the results of qualitative are probably different with quantitative, how do we deal with that?
Well, that's all goes back to the designing the your mixed method approaches. So if you think if you have a good experience how to do survey and how you do your interviews, normally you shouldn't face with such a problem. But if it comes, then you need to maybe revisit your research question, because here is you basically saying one is complementing another one. But if it is about not complementing some qualitative and quantitative, then there is a very good result. I personally, when I use a mixed method, I like to see some differences. I like to see when the survey one, okay, we complement with the, with the interviews, but also we want to see some new insight or new things. So it really depends on, it goes back to very good research design, multiple, and that's why it's better always when you do mixed method to have a couple of people with you. So if something goes wrong, you could have a chat and try to solve the issues.
All right, thank you very much for that. The next question is, hold on. Can we have multiple assumptions as we're both using in sequential, as in post-positivism and constructivism? Can you mix different assumptions?
You could, but you need to, you really need to look and revisit what you want to do when you want to apply for your research. If your worldview is a constructivism, of course you need to go with the assumption of constructivism. But if it's the pragmatism, you need to go with the pragmatism assumption. And that's very, very important. And this is the question I've seen with PhD student, I've seen with a junior researcher as well. You really, really need to know inside out your philosophical underpinning of what you want to apply for your research. And I really, really recommend you all to look at what you want to find out from your study, and also read well the assumptions. And some assumptions can be twisted. And if it's that is case in your study, then you need to maybe find some justification from different books or articles to justify why the particular assumption is not working in your case.
I see. All right. Thank you for that. Okay, next question is from the chat, is from Dr. Sandeep. What is the most suitable for hospitality research?
What is most suitable of what? Sorry.
I believe it's for mixed method approaches, which is the best for hospitality research.
I still don't understand what that means, because depends on your research question what you want to find. What is the best? You mean the type, Sandeep, or you mean the sequential and parallel, or you mean the philosophical? I'm not sure about the question.
Okay, hold on. He says model in the chat.
Model. Well, it really depends on is what you want to do, right? And I repeat, I don't know how many times today, is all goes back to research question you have. And if your research question is about finding some method is going to influence other one, you're doing exploratory or explanatory, or you have something, and based on that, you need to have a research question. So at the end of your introduction in a paper or in your thesis, you need to have, let's say, 2, 3 solid research questions to say, research question 1, I am going to do, and in the formulated and the wording in a way you're going to do quantitative. Second one, formulated in a way you want to do quantitative. And maybe third one, how you could actually, these two complement each other, or you want to find, you're finding something from one point and looking at the other one.
All right, thank you. Hina Amin from chat is asking, how do we validate qualitative research data?
Qualitative research data. So there are different approaches. I'm sure you could look at some of the textbooks, but the good ones is member checking is one of the approaches, which when you, let's say you interview some people, let's say you have 30 interviews and you back to the participant you interviewed, and after you're finding things and etc. from your qualitative and asking them, do you mean this thing? You repeat and asking them to tell you that. Triangulation is another one you could use. Asking somebody else validate your opinion, particularly some maybe senior member. If it's a thesis, you could ask your maybe PhD supervisor to look at it. If it's a paper, maybe you need to ask another member to check with you. It's another reliability and validity and things is building trust. If you could build a good trust, you get a sincere answer from your participants as well. So there are several ways of doing it.
All right, thank you for that, Professor. Okay, next we have from Jeremy from the chat. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Which research paradigm is more common in mixed methods, realism or pragmatism? Sorry.
It really depends. It's not about what is dominant than other one. Pragmatism being used more recently. So maybe that's dominant, but is again, I really like to highlight this to everybody who wants to use any philosophical underpinning for the applying mixed method. Please, is not about the good and bad. It's about your research question and whatever you want to find out and your understanding of the world, your research world. So it really depends on, it's not about good and bad.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Abu, here's an interesting question from the Slido. What is the difference between mixed method and triangulation?
Triangulation, part of the mixed method, when you have a interaction, you have a qualitative and quantitative, and between these two, you go in. So the method is a mixed method, and triangulation is a part of the mixed method, if you like. When you do you test for the reliability and validity, and you want to find out. So it's quite different.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Another one, this is also another interesting question, but I'm not sure if it's a bit too broad. What critical factors do you need to be considered in mixed methodology?
Critical factors. Really, again, really depends on the research question you have, and critical factor. And this, let's put it in a nutshell and very simplify this. Don't try to overcomplicating your mind. It's all about the research question and the process of you doing. My experience of doing mixed method might be totally different than Mustafa Rasil, my good friend, in Taylor University. We might have a different process of doing, we might use a different reliability and validity, we might face different issues during the research when you do the mixed methods. So you really need to see the case by case. So you could say, oh, this is an issue now, how we could, find the solution to this particular factors influencing, our research. So one of the questions was about if the complementary qualitative quantitative is not working. So again, you need to face that issue. Then you could say, oh, well, how we can sort out that now? So it's about process and about interactions.
Okay, I think that's a good point. And I think I've got a couple of questions here that sort of like are along the same vein for the Slido. So one question here is that, could you elaborate on methods of qualitative research and sample size, apart from using saturation? And another one also related to that is that, how can you prevent personal bias, especially in qualitative method? Like, how do you make valid inferences, even though there are contradictory findings in mixed methodology?
Right. So the first one was, remind me.
The first one is on methods and also sample size, aside from using saturation.
Right. Qualitative sample size, yeah. So qualitative sample size, yes, data saturation is one of that. And because it's not about generalizability, so it doesn't really matter how many data you want to collect. Data saturation is a good point, but also sometimes is about looking at your, I always look at my pilot stage. Normally before doing any qualitative, I do 5 or 6 pilot sort of interviews. And whatever this interview protocol I developed, I could modify during that pilot. So pilot stage, quite important for the qualitative one. And if you do a good job on that, normally you reach a good data saturation for after 20 samples. But I'm saying that you shouldn't quote me on that, because it might be different researcher by researcher. So there is no right or wrong question. If you look at any book or textbook, they might say 20, but 20 based on what? They need to have some assumption for that. And that's why data saturation is the most valid point. The personal bias, another question was, is again, that's the way you could avoid the personal bias is when you're doing a mixed method paper, you use a couple of other people to help you with the reliability and validity of your opinion. If your opinion too biased, too subjective, you might have another team member to say, oh, Babak, that stuff you're saying is not correct for X and Y, and reasons. So I think it's very much conversational, and you could avoid doing that. And very, very important point for the personal bias is about justification of use of literature review. If you do a good literature review, you minimize your personal bias. So you're basing your literature on a good paper, good journals, ongoing study, then you might try to avoid the personal bias. We all have a personal bias, and we cannot avoid it. We can just minimize the personal bias.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, one very interesting question from the Slido is that for sequential explanatory design, if the results of the qualitative side are different than the quantitative, how do you deal with that?
Well, you need to, that's a very sad paper, I would say. I think you need to revisit your research question or see why this is, you have a big differences. And also maybe that's the reason I'm saying sad, you might start recollecting some other data, because whatever you did in your qualitative or your quantitative might be wrong, or there is a fault. So you need to have a discussion with your colleagues, your co-authors, and then say how we can sort out that. These questions are always subjective and is a case based. So depends on the paper you write, depends on your process of dealing with this issue. You may reflect differently, and Benjamin might have different opinion, Mustafa might have a different opinion on this, but my opinion is you really need to have when you do mixed method, don't go solo author paper. You really need to have a couple of people to help you.
All right. Okay. Some very useful pointers. Okay. Dr. Sheila has another question, which is, what is the difference between a conceptual framework and theoretical framework?
Conceptual framework. Some people mix these two, but normally conceptual framework is.
Oh, I believe we may have lost Dr. Babak. Let me check and see. Is he still on the list?
I think it could be the internet connection.
Yeah, it just got dropped. So why don't we give him a few minutes to sort of like reconnect?
Yes.
But yes, thank you everybody else for submitting your questions. We've got a very healthy number of questions coming in.
Exactly.
Please do continue to use the Slido if you like, or also put it in the chat. I think the Slido will be better. The chat, a lot of people are mostly asking questions about how to of issues with the survey. So if you have any questions for Dr. Babak, please do make use of the Slido. It'll be a little bit easier for me to pull out the questions there. Okay. Hold on, just give a few more minutes. Dr. Jitesh, are you checking if his internet is okay?
Yes, he will be joining.
So sorry for this issue, everyone. This is, part and parcel of this sort of like Zoom conference-like setups. Things like this happen, and we just have to sort of like be patient and wait a little bit as things get sorted out. So,
Yeah,
okay, Prof is back already.
Here.
Okay, let me just. Hi, Prof. Babak.
I was kicked out. I don't know, for some reason.
Oh, so sorry to hear that. I believe. Well, I think you're back in already. So, yeah, I think you're in the middle of answering a question with regards to conceptual and theoretical framework.
Differences. So some people they say they are similar, but there are actually differences. Theoretical frameworks normally is based on existing theory, and conceptual framework is something you can develop yourself. So that's the main differences between. But some people, because they developing the conceptual framework based on theory, so they can mix these two. So that's the main differences and similarities, if you like.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, next question is, let's see. Okay, can you use mixed method for theory development?
You could use it, but again, depends on your research question. Why not? Because people like, let's say, Pierre Bourdieu, I don't know if those of you are familiar about the cultural capital and social capital idea. They developed their theory of the capital based on using both surveys and interviews. So he actually, one of the good examples probably is his studies on capital. He used that to develop a cultural capital, social capital, symbolic capital ideas. So yes, there is a possibility. But again, I'm revisiting my first thing I said probably in first or second slide today. What is your research and why you want to develop a theory? Because there are already lots of theories. I'm sure it is interesting, but there are lots of existing theory, and I don't really recommend that for somebody doing PhD or MSc.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, one other question here we have is that what are the best qualitative and quantitative methods that are most compatible with each other?
Compatible with each other. Again, depends, right? It's normal structure equation modeling, if you have quantitative, works very well with interviews. So other example I gave today, the fuzzy data analysis works very good with the interview method, and normally thematic analysis is a good one for the interviews. But again, another example today I gave about use in medical tourism paper, we use a structural model with the Jaya model. Again, is another approach. So there are multiple ways of using and applying different methods, and it really depends what you want to find out and how you want to apply them. There's no right or wrong as long as you can justify them.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. Could you please tell us what are the aspects in which social constructivism differ from postpositivism, and what are the similar points between them?
All right, that's going to be a long conversation, right? Whoever email wants to have a chat about that, please drop me email and we can have that because that is going to be a long conversation. And again, it depends on whoever asked that question is your opinion on the subject that you use of social constructivism and pragmatism or critical theory, any other theory. But it depends on your opinion and your view. So I'm more than happy for chats with somebody who have a different opinions. Let's say I am pragmatism person and they say, no, I want social constructivism. We can have some dialectic chat about it. So it depends on what I want to say here. It really depends on what you want to find out from your world. If you want to say, and don't hang up too much with which philosophical underpinning you want to use. Just find something fits your personality, fits your research, and go on with that. Don't say, well, it looks like pragmatism a hot potato at the moment. Let's go with the pragmatism approach. Don't do that. It's just find a good justification for that. And textbooks are very good these days. They're differentiating very well these approaches.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think that's actually a very important point to make. A lot of times, research people who are doing research these days like to always see themselves as like, I'm a pure qualitative researcher or a quantitative researcher. And I think it's more important to just find a method that is going to be most comfortable with you and not just sort of write whatever you feel is most important, the most popular or the most trendy at the moment. So I think that's a very, very good words of advice that hopefully our postgraduate students will take to heart. All right. Okay. Another question is how can triangulation be related to embedded research design?
Again, it depends on the way you want to do the triangulation. If that your triangulation approach is going to be, you have a quantitative and a qualitative, and they are embedded and they are supporting each other, then yes, triangulation is going to be helpful there. If the triangulation using just for the reliability and validity purposes, that can be different. If you're using sequential or parallel, the triangulation might be different again. Really depends on the research question and how you want to apply that triangulation. So it depends. That's why I'm saying you need to categorize first very clearly how you want to embed the triangulation from the start. Then we could have a conversation on how you could apply the triangulation in your
okay. Okay, thank you for that. One other question, which actually is quite straightforward, but I think it'd be good to just hear your answer on it. If someone uses a focus group discussion or interview to identify variables or factors, and then they verify using quantitative analysis, can that be considered to be mixed method?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Another question. For a theoretical framework, what would be the steps involved to use sequential exploratory research?
Theoretical framework. I don't understand the question.
I think it's if you want to develop a theory, I suppose, based on this question.
Yeah. Again, that's depends on which kind of theory you want to develop and why you want to develop that theory. There is no right or wrong, but when you develop your research question, you need to say justify. So the purpose of developing using mixed method is scale development. The purpose of using mixed method is I know a quantitative framework there, but I feel that quantitative conceptual model needs some modification. And for support of that, I need to do extra, let's say, focus group interviews, I don't know, ethnography analysis, etc., to support my quantity. So it really depends on how you want to develop the theory and which kind of theory you want. Sometimes maybe even you don't need to do mixed method. Maybe just a pure good qualitative is going to help you with developing that. So it really depends how you want to move between the scene, if you like, here.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, I believe that is all the questions that we have. Would anybody like to sort of like just unmute your microphones and ask a question to Dr. Babak directly? I mean, we still have quite a bit of time left in today's session. Probably. Oh, okay. Another question has just come in. There are many qualitative methods such as thematic analysis or IPA that may not have strong reliability. How does it support quantitative research parts?
Well, maybe you need to then find the one has a good one you want to go with the approach. You already know there is no good reliability and validity, right? So a thematic one, as long as you know how to justify. I use several thematic analysis in my papers, but for the justification of the reliability and validity, I wrote quite long section on that for the qualitative. Because what happens, people just say, also did the reliability and validity. No, it's not. That's not the best way of saying that. You actually need to explain to your readers how you did the reliability and validity, how you did the member checking, how you develop a trust, how you had some interview protocol, why interview protocol didn't use, why use a semi-structure, why use unstructured interview. It really depends. Why some people they like to use a grounded theory. which I don't believe on grounded theory, because I think it's we as a researcher, we know what is going on in the world. So it's always going to be semi-grounded theory. But again, depends on what you want to find out. You know, is no right or wrong question.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, that's a very, very good point. So thank you for that. Okay, I got a few more questions. There's some people realizing, oh, we've run out of questions. We need to ask it very quickly. What would be a suitable method to develop conceptual model and stages? Yeah, this is a very weird question as well.
Yeah. My answer will be just you need to look at what you want to find out, right? And how you want to, one is, don't look at the formula. Some of the question I'm receiving today, people looking at the formula. And there is no formula for quantitative concept. Or for example, why that sample size? Why that, why you want to use qualitative for research first? Why you want to do quantitative first? There is no formula for it. It's all about justification. And if you can justify why the first one is going to be qualitative, why the second one is going to be quantitative, or vice versa, that is good enough. Remember, we are not trying to save the world here. There is a research question. You want to answer that research question. That's it. So for that, please just focus on, you know, find the good evidence to support your research. That's, I think, Benjamin might say the same, Mustafa, I'm sure the same, is about justification and clarifying what you want to do. As long as you can justify and clarify, that's enough. And also, you always need to say the shortcoming of your research. There's no perfect research in the world. There's none exists. So as long as you know the way you apply your research, doesn't matter mixed method, qualitative or quantitative, there are some shortcomings, and justify that for your readers. That's good enough.
All right. Okay. Okay, let's see. I'm not seeing any new questions come in. I'm seeing a lot of the questions we have like similar things that were answered before, so I'm not going to repeat them again. But yeah, so I think that will be it. I think Dr. Babak has already been answering questions for about almost 40 minutes. So I think we'll give him, we'll thank you very much for taking the time to share with us on this lovely Saturday, for taking the time on your weekends to sort of like share all these very, very lovely and useful insights for all of us here on what we can do to work on mixed method research of our own. I think that you're making a very important point that, you know, a lot of work now these days actually is sort of like becoming mixed method in practice, essentially. You know, it's people are no longer just seeing themselves as being either a qual or quant researcher. They're using a sort of like a mixture as and when is necessary. And I think that's something that everybody needs to be more open or more flexible moving forward. Okay.
Exactly. And
all right.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure today. And good luck with your research, whatever you do, you as a research paper or your dissertation or your thesis. Just want to finish off my today's almost echoing on Benjamin's point, is just look at the justification before you doing any research. Don't say, oh, it seems like mixed method is hot potato, I'm going to do mixed method. Simple quantitative, simple qualitative can answer your research question. Why you want to, you know, complicate your life and for yourself, just about the research question. And have a lovely day or wherever you are.
All right. So yes, before we end today's session, I believe, can I just make a request similar to what we've done with the earlier sessions? For everybody, please turn on their videos so that we can have a little picture taking session for all participants.
Sure.
Lydia, you are taking the pictures, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Please confirm 1, 2,